Hello, everyone. Um, my son went to high school and they sent me an email about intuitive thinking. And they had a couple of other types of thinking, and he kind of fit a little bit here, there, and yonder, but it wasn't solid. But then I met Paul Burns, our guest today, and he said he's an intuitive thinker. And I checked on Google, and they have intuitive personality. And Matthias is so much like that. And then I talked to my good friend Ruby Moses, who's Native American, and she works for a mayor on the Nez Perce Reservation. And she says that she works with people that are intuitive all the time. So it's very natural within the Native American community. So I thought it would be wonderful to have Paul talk about how he thinks and how he came up with the GPS assessment, which is a wonderful assessment that has touched so many people's lives and helped them grow personally. So, Paul, let's just start in. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm a minister. I'm a pastor, and I pastor two churches in Dallas, and I also coach Christian leaders all over the world, and I write books as well. Um, I have a family. I'm married, and I have two children, 12 and 9. They're both adoptive children, and so that's been a big part of my learning experience as well. And yeah, talk about intuitive. I mean, I mean, you can't, some things you can't teach how to raise any particular child. Every child, you've got to figure out, with them about who they are and how to lead them. And so I've learned so much from raising these two amazing, unique individuals. And of course, living with my wife, who's very different than I am, and learning our different styles as well. I'm wondering where she comes out in this. Intuitive is not her learning style. I know that. So explaining myself to her sometimes is a challenge.
Understand. Uh, so, intuitive thinking. Intuitive thought refers to the ability to make quick judgments and decisions based on instinct, prior knowledge, and immediate perceptions rather than systematic reasoning, that gut feeling. So that resonated with you. When I say that, what are you thinking?
Yeah, when you read that to me, I immediately thought, yes, 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 I feel understood. Uh, and I took the Myers-Briggs. I've taken it a couple of times, but when I first took it was in college, and it's got a either I think intuitive or thinking scale, N or T, and I'm way far on the spectrum on intuitive in the way that I think and do things. So that was my first awareness of that I'm an intuitive person, but it took a while to learn what that meant.
Mm-hmm. And that's why we have it here. Matthias tends to be on the intuitive spectrum. And so it's like, okay, what does that mean? And how do we help you function and work
Yeah.
most effectively? So, how was school for you? When did you learn about yourself?
Well, I mean, school was great for a while. Like, I did really well in elementary and middle school, and then high school. Well, eighth grade or so, things started to get challenging for me. And, I think my parents thought I was just lazy when it came to school. And maybe I was a little lazy, but what I'm starting to figure out, it took me a while to figure out that certain subjects and the way they were taught it just made it hard for my brain to figure it out. I couldn't like connect with it. And so my only kind of go-to response was just to check out. And so here I was taking higher math that I thought of myself math like I was good at basic arithmetic, but when it came to the higher stuff, I got to a point where I just couldn't like, so I'm just sitting there daydreaming in class, and the teacher is just saying, "Come on, Paul, what, you're just sitting there doing nothing." It was only years later where I realized I just wasn't taught right. I wasn't accommodated for the way my brain works, and I think I could have done much better in school. Um, almost didn't pass high school. College, same thing. I was so checked out on certain subjects, but I did okay. I finished college, but it really wasn't until seminary where I learned my really how to learn and achieve academically. So that was 10 years after college. So that was
Yeah. What did the professor, you talked about a professor that really helped you.
yeah. So yeah, and I was doing well in seminary because I think in professionally I was a financial advisor, and I kind of learned what I was good at and how to learn things. I was learning how to learn. And so, but I was still struggling with something I struggled with in high school and in college, which was writing. It was really hard for me to write. And, I think I got away with only writing two essays in all of my college. I don't know. I'm like one of those athletes who you figure out is illiterate by the time he graduates and he never learned to read. That's kind of how I was with writing. And so, but this professor helped me out. After class one day, it was one of those conversational seminar classes where everybody, processes things out loud. And I'm really good verbal processor. And so you get an idea and I can start working with it. And after class, he said, Paul, you speak eloquently, off the cuff, you think so well out loud and express yourself so well. And then he said, what's wrong with your writing? It's nothing like you talk, you know. And he said, all right, I'm going to give you some advice that my wife, she thinks like you, and she has become a writer, but what she had to learn to do was process verbally before you write it. And so you got to learn to write like you think and like you talk. And so I started kind of talking out my thoughts as I would write papers. And then, I would talk it first. I would say it, I would speak it to a study partner or things like that. And I learned, and then it just kind of opened up my writing once it kind of began to connect that way. And like it became just now an internal process for me. My writing started to sound like my verbal processing and it began to flow. And man, now I've written 4 books and of course I prepare sermons and newsletter articles and blogs and all those things as well. And thanks so much to that single professor who was willing to ask to dig a little deeper with me um, and confront me on my struggles.
What I have found and what Matthias has said, that would have really helped. But I think all the people that I've talked to basically said, what I really needed is somebody to just see me and help me figure me out.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that would help any student. I have 2 adult children that are very sequential. They do really well in school, very verbal, no problem. And then I have 2 that needed the extra help. But a lot of students I'm finding need that teacher or somebody that says, let's figure this out together. Or I see you.
Both of our children are neurodivergent in different ways. My son is on the autism spectrum, in a category that used to be called Asperger's, and just really kind of barely, but enough, to change the way he learns. And also he's ADHD, and my daughter is ADHD and dyslexic. And so, I really have been thoroughly impressed with the school district that we're in has put together an ARD plan, I can't even remember what that means, but it's an accommodation plan to
Yeah.
help them to learn at their pace in their way. And so, schools are getting better at it. I know that.
Those are getting much better. When it comes to special needs, they're incredible. It's people like Matthias because they are so intelligent, or they're still in the regular classroom
Mhm.
and they're still being taught in ways that don't make sense to their brain. And
Yeah.
so, like I said, they often get hurt. And so we have a wonderful program now but it only starts, I think they're starting beginning starting at 10th grade, but they were only starting to 11th after the child was hurt. And they realized they needed something else, and they would take them out of the regular classroom and put them into this special program. And what they found, and they were surprised, was people like Matthias that think in pictures or that are intuitive that don't fit into the regular classroom. And then they were given more art types of things, and they flourished in that part of it. But they were still figuring out how to actually teach them. It was really interesting. But they are doing more and more as they're realizing there's some kids that don't, a lot of kids don't fit in a regular classroom that are high sequential, very verbal. You mean people are unique?
Yeah, right. And and maybe that's why, I like assessments so much, because, a good assessment can really help find someone's strength, uh, or weaknesses or their style. And so there's the world of assessments to me has been interesting to me for a long time. And starting with the actually not the Myers-Briggs was not the first assessment I took. It was in high school. It was a vocational assessment. And when I took it in the 10th grade and I was all gung-ho about math, though barely passing math, I kind of answered my questions, in a way that came out as engineer. I got a bunch of engineer vocational, recommendations, aerospace engineer, mechanical engineer. And I thought, I'm an engineer. And frankly, my brain could never, I don't know, I maybe could figure out engineering, but it wouldn't be through the normal way. Uh, but at some point, I kind of got in better touch as to who I was as a learner and what I was interested into. And when I kind of let go that mathematical thing and really begin to drift more towards, language arts and, you know, um, literature and things like that, I was really, you know, better suited in that. I was doing more music and acting and things like that. Well, so I took the same assessment the second time, and I had a totally different set of answers. And it is amazing how accurate this assessment was when I took it with better self-knowledge. The number one, it had, I'll save the number one, but it had teacher, um, music teacher. It had baseball coach. I was a baseball player, and I've coached sports, and I have taught. Minister was on the list. That was number two, but number one was midwife. Isn't that crazy?
That's crazy.
Crazy. And here a teenage boy gets midwife, number one as vocation test. You don't go around bragging about that. But when I was in my seminary training, and uh, we had to go through what's called clinical pastoral education, where they put you in a ministry setting, and in this case, it was a hospital. And and this is how I learned. You put me in an environment, and you just figure things out. It's intuitively, but you can't intuit in a classroom. You can intuit in a learning lab, is a better way to put it. And so they put me in charge of the neonatal intensive care unit, antepartum, postpartum delivery area of the hospital, which was a strange, I was in there with several women that were in this group with me, and they had wanted that part of the hospital, and when I got to do it, they were not happy about it, and I was very confused because, you know, at any rate, I didn't know. I mean, I didn't have children or anything, so I didn't know anything about it. But the guy that assigned me, I believe, was attuned to the Holy Spirit in a very deep way, and somehow he knew that that's where I was supposed to be. And this is what I learned. I learned what it meant to be a spiritual midwife. That what I did was help deliver people in difficult situations. I didn't deal with the good pregnancies. I wasn't dealing with the happy births. That's not where they send the chaplain. It's to neonatal intensive care units. It is through pregnancy loss events. It is through death of a baby. All of those horrible things. And so what I learned is that I'm a midwife, a spiritual midwife. I deliver people, uh, and also I bring things into life. So ministry wise, I'm happiest when I'm helping to create new things, and that's where the GPS comes about. I'll stop right there because I said a lot, but I wanted to say that Janet not only has taken the GPS, but she has been trained to coach with the GPS for her clients, and so she knows a lot about this. But
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and pass the ball back to you.
So tell us about the GPS.
Yeah. Okay. So when I was working on my doctorate at another in a second seminary in Portland, Oregon, Western Seminary, I was interested in how human beings develop, and particularly regarding their spirituality. Is it just that God chooses certain people to believe in Him and certain people not, and then that's how it falls out? Or is it that certain people believe in God because of circumstances in their development? Or there are Christians that fervently believe in God but struggle to love people practically in their relationships. Is that because they haven't been given the Holy Spirit? Or is there a developmental issue relationally? And so I began to study the brain and psychology, and particularly attachment theory and family systems theory, and to try to understand how, if we are to develop human beings in the church that are Christ-like, how would that happen? And then, how would you measure it? How would you identify where people are in the process of being able to love God, self, and others in the way of Jesus? And so that's the GPS came out of all those wonderings and questions, and the wonderful thing about a doctorate program is that it's I mean, you get some teaching, but they just give you stuff and you work with it, or they set you loose and you go and you explore and you experiment, you try stuff, and so we're like mad scientists in there, which is great for a guy like me who just likes to get his hands on things. Um, and so the GPS is the result of that work, and coming up with the categories and the questions of the assessment is hard to explain to people because I did a ton of research, and then this is just what my gut said is it, but we tested it, so it wasn't just like, how do you know this works, Paul? Well, my gut says it. I trust my gut, but do you trust my gut with your spiritual life? But so 700 or so people took it. We did statistical analysis on it, and it came out extremely high in validity. And then we refined it even further so that it even increased its validity. And and accuracy in its assessment. And so, we've reached over 1,500 people have taken the GPS. It measures your ability, basically your ability to love God, self, and others in very measurable, practical ways.
And if you take the class, you get coaching both before and after, and then you go through it with the group, the different questions and ideas or groups of ideas, and it's
Yeah.
just awesome.
I do
Um,
it in a class, I do it individually, but yeah, we go through it now with the book, which is called Becoming Spiritually Intelligent, 9 Paths Towards Your Most Loving Self. And everybody will find whatever the path that they need to work on. But we go through these 9 paths, and Janet has been through this with me, but you do the assessment, see where you are, you begin working through it with yourself and others, and then we measure again and see, you did this and your husband did it.
yes,
Did you increase your scores over the 9?
he did specifically. I mean, it was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, mine went up some, but his went up significantly,
Yeah. You
and
had a big breakthrough.
he had a big breakthrough. Um, the thing is, why do pastors burn out or why do people burn out? The thing, this can help figure out that why and reset. It can really help you in so many ways. So if you have a chance, by all means do it. Um, so looking at this intuitive personality, some of the specific things of they're normally introverted. Um, Matthias is really good with people. He's a leader. Absolutely. Everybody sees it in him, but he's going, yeah, but I just like to be inside myself. That's not where I'm at. It's internally. And that's introverts. That's where we're
Yeah.
at.
And if you're an introvert and you don't accept that about yourself, you will burn yourself out trying to extend yourself beyond your strength here. And so that happened to me because as a pastor, you have to engage a lot. And I'm kind of on the line on introvert extrovert, but I'm at my best when I lean into the self-care of an introvert.
Mhm.
So I'm more creative and I'm more intuitive, more in touch with myself when I spend time by myself, with myself and God. When I take time, on the Sabbath, I take a really, really careful Sabbath to where I don't return calls, emails, texts, and I really do spend time with my family and keep things at home mainly and things like that. So, you know, just recognizing the way you think and also if you're an introvert versus an extrovert, how you take care of yourself is what is at stake. It doesn't mean that I can't be engaging with people on Sunday morning. But on Monday morning, I'm going to keep my calendar pretty clean
Yeah.
as a pastor.
Oh, I relate totally. I love people, but give me my time alone.
Right.
I've got to have that. You've already talked about that you're hands-on. You definitely think outside of the box.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
which it's great, when you're trying to fit into somebody else's box, it's very frustrating for an intuitive person. Some people just love to have a template. When they gave me the template for my dissertation, I was like, I can never do it. This is it. I'm done. I can't do this program. I cannot do this template. And so I had to really flesh that out in a way that made sense to me. And so and I had to ask the you know the my advisor to just let me do this in a way that made sense to me, and then we can cram it into your boxes at the end in a way, but let me just free flow this thing. But so, you know, but it means, but when you're set free from the templates of the world, and you're free to create, man, you can do some things. And
Mhm.
so it's really matter. And so a job like a pastor, you know, is really, I mean, I never know what's going to happen every day. Every day I could be doing counseling, coaching, I could be doing a funeral, I could be preparing for a sermon, I could be in a Bible study. I could be out doing evangelism or mission. There's no structure in my week really. I just do what's in front of me right now. As long as I can get my sermon together, by Sunday morning, everybody's happy. But so I love to create and try new things, and being a pastor allows me to do that, or at least the churches that I serve allow me to do that. There was a church that I had interviewed for years ago that I thought I really wanted. It was a big corporate church, with a big staff, and it seemed really nice to me. And I had this great guy that I really connected to who was on the search committee. And in the end, it was down to two candidates, me and another guy. And this great guy saw me for who I am and knew that I'd be miserable in that job. And I was so disappointed not to get the job. But he said, "Paul, you're a hands-on guy. This is not a hands-on position. You're managing others. It's more about other people. You need to get in it with people. You're going to be happier in smaller churches." And he was so right. And when I accepted that vocationally, I became much happier. And now, you know, serving these two small churches, I'm just so happy. They just let me loose. Yeah, go try it, go do it, whatever. I'm just um, so
So much fun. It's so
yeah,
much fun.
yeah,
Two things come to mind. So again, it's people recognizing who you are and seeing who you are. And I think that's true across the board. How do we fit? And one of the things that I told one of the mothers is there are so many jobs out there. Your child will be fine. There's a place for them. Because she's dealing with a 4-year-old that's all over the place, and and it's always discouraging. How do I get them through school? How do I get them through? And it's that there's a job for you. There's a place for you in the way they think and who they are. There is a place in our world.
yeah.
And so it's just helping them figure out who they are. But it reminds me of the story with Matthias. I handed him, he's an artist. So I handed him a online drawing class. His response was to go um, find out how other people do the same thing of drawing those particular things, of doing shading and so forth. He didn't just do the class, he went to go find out all about it, right? How other people do it. And he spent a couple of months doing that. And I went, that wasn't the idea. You're supposed to do the class. So then he did the class, but he did it starting in the middle, what was he was interested in. And then I had to go, I think you need to start at the beginning of the class because to understand shading, you have to have the first couple of pieces.
He had to do it his way,
He
and
had to do it his way.
before, yeah.
Yeah. And at the time, I did not understand
Mhm.
what he was doing. At this point, I'm going, it so makes sense to your brain what you did. And I would have responded very differently than I did at the time. But I was trying to figure it out. But it's that learning to let go and let them figure it out and then go, oh, that's the way they work.
Yeah. And the corporate world is getting better at this too. In fact, they're way ahead of way ahead of the church world in so many ways. But my wife works in human resources for a very large multinational corporation. I mean, they have 50,000 employees, and what they have, they use assessments to help to understand. It's for team building, and it's for to understand, how to manage people with different learning styles, and how to put a team of people together to where you kind of have all the necessary pieces to make it all work instead of
Right.
not. You don't want all intuitive thinkers on your team. It's a mess. It would be a mess. You don't want people like me building bridges, right? You don't want that. You need what are the other kinds of thinkers? I mean, did you?
One's usually the big picture thinker.
Yeah,
Another one is the managers, love managers. I'm
yeah,
not one of them. Um, like I said, you have to have an intuitive one that can help people work together.
yeah.
Yeah, anyway, you get the picture.
You
Yeah.
got you got to have a well-rounded team, and
Mhm.
corporations are good at that. And they do emotional intelligence assessments. They do personality assessments like DISC and other things. Like they do strength finders. They use
Yeah,
that to help understand their employees' strengths and help them to understand. I mean, it's great. We should be doing that in the church.
I
We should
agree.
be doing assessments in the church and understanding, our leadership teams like that. And and there should be spiritual assessment, and that's why, I mean, missing from all these assessments were they had there's a lot of spiritual gifts assessments, and
Right.
that's good, right? But spiritual health, which is essentially what the spiritual intelligence I call it, but it's spiritual health, that didn't exist.
Yeah.
And so how would you know what your level of spiritual health is? That's less about personality though, but it is more about, how you're doing in relationship with God, self, and others. And, um, you know, the church is really struggling to love people like Jesus. That's our biggest problem. And you don't have people praising the church for their ability to love and accept people as they are. Um, and it would go a long way for the church to embrace, understanding the differences of people and celebrating their uniqueness, no matter what it is. If it's within a healthy range of what it um, helping people to grow spiritually in a way that works for them. Um, then you'd really have something there, in my opinion, if you can do that as a church leader.
Oh, I would love it. Absolutely love it. Step by step, we're
Yeah.
learning and it's out there. So we can use it, particularly for our leadership. You start there and go forward. I think it would be amazing. A lot of people would be loved well, be loved better, and the leadership themselves would enjoy leading better.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's yeah, we need to get spiritually healthy. Absolutely. Um, Going back to our intuitive characteristics, um, they're into self-development, obviously, and that's very true. Um, they think about the future. When you're creative, what are you going to do next? Is that okay? What does this look like next week, next year, onward? Um, it's interesting to me because I'm a big picture person. Um, Working with managers. Do you have any problems working with managers sometimes?
I mean, well, I think probably my wife is in the manager category. I mean, that's what she is, and she's very good at it. And, you know, our our she does change management. That is her expertise. And so, you know, change management is a struggle for me, for instance, because I just, when you just know that, I don't know, how do you know? I mean, I just know that this is the next thing to do. Well,
Mhm.
so let's just all get on board and do it. I'm the leader. I know it's right. Let's do it. Right. That's horrible change management, right?
Right.
Because change management people, they're detail oriented. they're a step-by-step sequential process people, and you have to lead when you're leading a whole organization through a major change, you have to have an incredible plan in place to do it that involves explaining why everything matters in this plan. And that I cannot do that. And so when my wife and are planning a vacation, for instance, we take different roles in it. Who's going to plan this part, and I'm going to lead us through this part. And we've learned how to work with each other, and also to stay in our lanes and stay out of each other's ways, where our strengths are. And I'm kind of a big picture guy as well, so I'm good at coming up with a vacation idea, and then and she can plan it out in more detail as well.
Yeah.
Think through it better. So
Yeah.
we can be a team. We can be a team. We just have to really understand that different isn't bad.
Right.
That different, is necessary and
Hmm.
actually beneficial. I need her, she needs me. Um,
Exactly. Exactly.
I keep things moving forward. She keeps things working.
You gotta have both, right? You gotta have both. Uh, okay. Typically don't function well in a 9 to 5 job. Don't like routines. Can you show your list of what you're supposed to do today?
Oh, right. Yeah. So I'm like, I got to get some stuff done today. I can't just sit here and do whatever I want. So I put together, it's a little list. What did I have? I had to send some video links from my last teaching session. I got a contract proposal I got to work on. I got a funeral service I got to work on, a newsletter, come up with sermons for the next 6 weeks. Got to create a bulletin for Sunday. And it helps me to have it. If it's on paper, I don't have to hold it into my brain. Because I can only really hold one thing in my brain at a time. I'm such a single-minded person. And so I can look at the list and, like, okay, and I focus on that. And then I don't have to remember, I can look to see what's next. And I might not do like anything in order. It's just whatever I feel like doing next, or what, it makes sense to me right now to do. So anyway, that's a good example of that. But 9 to 5, you know, um, like today I came in about 10 o'clock, in the morning. I did kind of some morning routine stuff that for myself, to Bible study and prayer, and just some recharge time. And then came in at 10. I'll leave after our conversation today. I'll go home. I'll go grocery shopping, work on dinner. I've got a meeting at the church tonight. And it's so I like to kind of come in and come out like that. And sitting here in my office or something like that from 9 to 5 is just soul crushing to me.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I did that. I worked for the corporate world for 10 years, and I did my best to work within that with what I had, but it was a struggle.
Yeah. Yeah. But even making that list, is that a normal way your brain thinks?
I have to make myself do some things, but it does when I know I have to get some stuff done. I know the only way it's going to happen is if I make a list. Um, and otherwise I'll just forget half of it.
One of the things we've had to teach Matthias, and other people have said the same thing, is they have to have routine in certain areas,
Yeah.
or they will forget to brush their teeth, or they'll forget whatever it is because their mind's more random,
Yeah.
whatever feels good.
I learned that the hard way when I was working for a church, and I felt called to go off and do soul metrics, and I had created the assessment. I wanted to bring it out out into the world, and that took a lot of work, which was very hard for me. The creating of it all was great, but getting the website together, and all these things that had to happen. And then, where do you find people, marketing and things like that. So, but I was working at home and then COVID happened. And so I was at home, my wife was working at home. I had no structure. And I just found myself lost on a lot of days, not knowing, what can I do today? There's no like no routine at all. And so it really was, I did that for a couple of years, just that. And, I got, I made progress and I taught, I've worked with hundreds of people on their spiritual health, which is great, and taught a lot of coaches to use the process. So big success there, in my opinion. But when I got back into the church, which does have a structure, I actually was much happier because I didn't have to create everything all the time. So, it's good. So like finding that right balance for me was important of, a structure, a supportive structure to work within that allowed the freedom of my intuitive, creative side. And so I've found that right balance. I still do the soul metric stuff on Fridays, and then I do church stuff, So not quite a 9 to 5 job, but a regular job on some sense.
Yeah.
Regular
I,
as a minister it is.
Yeah, I'm finding that true of others as well. They need
Mhm.
that balance.
Yeah.
Um, you always need something to look forward to.
Yeah. You get bored. Yeah. I get, like for instance, and this, wonderful church that I served, before I did Soul Metrics, awesome church. But really what they needed was a manager, more of a manager personality. They had a lot going on. And it was a larger church, and they had programs, and they needed somebody to manage that. And I was a little stifled in that. And it's nobody's fault, but so my family still goes to that church, and I do, and I preach. So they have their own pastor and their own church. I like that, but yeah, management. It's about now. It's different than like big picture leadership or strategic leadership. It's more about continuing to make things work as they have been, um, managing, the traditions and things like that as well. But so if I don't have like I started playing men's baseball, which is nuts at my age, but I love it. And I know every Monday night I'm going to have a game and it's going to be fun, right?
Mhm.
Hopefully I won't injure myself. Um, you know, I know that I'm about to take a trip to Chicago to meet with other pastors who are interested in finding ways to grow their church. So I know I've got that on my calendar to look forward to. Um, just little things like that that really help. It's always great to have your next trip on your, like I need to get my next vacation on a calendar. And then I can start thinking about it and,
Yeah, I
relishing
get
the
that.
possibility.
Um, I know you're for an empathetic person, a good listener.
Thank you.
What makes you a good coach?
Yeah. So, you know, I think what makes me a good listener and good coach, which are, very hand in hand, is that I truly believe that every person is endlessly fascinating, wonderful, and worth my time. Like there's no boring people. People say, "Oh, I'm boring," or "This person's boring." I'm like, no, they're just not allowed to be themselves. And so they cover up their wonderfulness. And so what I love about coaching is discovery, discovering people's giftedness and hearing their story. Everybody's got a story that's worth
And
Hollywood and books, and everybody's got a story worth telling. And so I get to hear those stories, and and I just I think that is what drives my coaching is I really care what people have to say, and I care about their goals and their progress and want to see it. I mean, that's the best thing is celebrating these kind of either spiritual, emotional, vocational uh, uh, milestones and breakthroughs, like your husband's, in the class. I won't go into it, but he had a big breakthrough, and to see the change on his face, and to know that this is a real life-altering moment that happened in the context of this group, it's the best.
Right. And the last thing that Google said about being intuitive was practical. The GPS could not be more practical.
Right. And this it's like in church, the church world or the spiritual world, it's like, and some people just hate the GPS because they don't like the idea that our spiritual lives can be quantified in any way. It's ineffable. It's transcended, and that's all true as well. But um, but without measurability, there's no progress. It's very unlikely. It's less likely to have progress. And so it's like you say you love people. How do you love people? I mean, what's that look like practically? Is it just a feeling or just a concept you have, a value you hold? But if the Christian life is not practical, then it is not anything that makes a difference in the world.
Agreed. Agreed. And Jesus was very practical on earth.
Yeah, oh, very, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
He's not a pie in the sky. He used the most mundane, understandable examples
Yeah.
uh, about how to describe something that's virtually indescribable, the kingdom of heaven, but he made it tangible and accessible to fishermen and, you know, all kinds of people. And
Exactly.
we don't even know, he knew how to teach people like, and so he'd come and say, I know Paul's intuitive, so I've got to just send him out on a mission. Paul, you just go out on a mission, and that's how Paul's going to learn. And
Yep.
other the Sermon on the Mount, they just need it spelled out, spell out nice and clear. I'm taking notes, and I'm going to do it. I'm not like that. But some people
Yeah.
are.
Yeah. But he had a broad range of people,
Yeah,
and particularly Jewish people are very high word, and their educational system is basically get into the conversation.
yeah,
So they
oh
sound
yeah,
like they're arguing when they're just
yeah.
talking about ideas and those kind of things. But he understood his audience.
You did.
And so
Yeah,
it was he's very practical,
yeah.
very practical. So, well, this has been wonderful. And I think our audience is going to really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Paul.
Thanks for having me. I always like talking to you, and I'm so glad you're doing this podcast.